So now the American people have moved from blaming Biden to now blaming Trump, and his own approval rating on the economy is plummeting pretty rapidly. Now, I know Trump well, as you do, and he won't like that. He won't like the fact that his economic polling is plummeting. So this has to work quite quickly, doesn't it?
Obviously, all we're going to hear is the fear-mongering from the other side. Everything from the past 8 years when he first came in, it was, we're going to go to war with Korea. He was a Russian asset. We're going to go to war. Everything is fear-mongering. Piers, the guy hasn't been in for 3 months. Everybody needs to just relax.
As you know, Piers Morgan is always desperate to grade his old friend, Donald Trump, on a curve. But Trump's disastrous economic mismanagement is cratering not only his overall approval rating, but his economic approval rating as well. And this forces Morgan to adopt increasingly critical views of the Trump administration. And during the most recent episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored, Piers was critical of Donald Trump and actually triggered a MAGA Republican sycophant on the panel. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. It's always fun when Piers Morgan, who claims to be a nonpartisan journalist, is forced by circumstance to occasionally criticize Donald Trump. And so I want to play some clips from the most recent episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored, in which Morgan does indeed do that. And I want you to note in particular the reaction from Vinny here, who's he's 3 places away from Piers Morgan. He's the co-host of Patrick Bet-David's Pro MAGA podcast. So we're going to play these clips and unpack it together.
Let me start with you, Cenk. Where are we with tariff gate? Because it seems to me the biggest problem right now for the administration is not the principle of leveling tariffs, which can be debated, or the overarching philosophy behind it, which is that America should be doing more manufacturing. I think most people agree with that. The real problem is the constant mixed messaging from the top people at the White House is causing, I think, real uncertainty and real damage, not least to Donald Trump's approval ratings on the economy.
Yeah, 100%. There's really no argument about it. I mean, the folks that are saying art of the deal are hilarious. So, and it can be proven very simply. So first, he does these global, massive nuclear tariffs. So as you know, Piers, on this show, I said they'll never last. They're maniacal. And I also said, as you're pointing out, that tariffs can be done right. They could be targeted and strategic based on industries or countries in specific. So then Donald Trump backpedals, and you can tell it's a backpedal and not some sort of art of the deal because he got absolutely nothing in return. So the 90-day pause was based on zero give back from any other country. It's because he had miraculously crashed the stock market and the bond market at the same time, which was previously held unimaginable because one is supposed to go up while the other one goes down, but he managed to do both. And now China tariffs is super strong. Okay, exemptions for iPhones and electronics. Why? Because he hadn't thought it through. He hasn't thought through any of this. He's always doing this in a way that makes no sense at all. And by the way, if you like tariffs and you like the idea of rebuilding manufacturing in this country, Donald Trump just did massive damage to it. Because after this, who's going to want to do tariffs again? So there's absolutely no planning here. And then let's see how he negotiates, if he can negotiate with China at all. But it's done nothing but damage and gotten us no good return so far.
Which is absolutely true. Again, I'll point out, yeah, there's nothing wrong with tariffs in theory, surgical precise tariffs. President Biden employed tariffs. Donald Trump's tariffs in his first term were quaint by comparison to what he's unleashing now. And even then, it amounted to one of the largest tax increases in American history. And 92% of the revenue generated by the tariffs effectively had to go to subsidizing farmers here in America because the China tariffs actually hurt them. So again, Trump's tariff application is overall pretty bad. But there's nothing wrong in theory with surgical, very precise tariffs. That's not what Donald Trump is doing. And I'll also point out that, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks there, who spoke first, mentioned that, Trump made certain exemptions for smartphones and laptops. And then Trump, I guess, felt slighted because people were mocking him for backpedaling. So then later on, like a day later, he goes on Truth Social and says there were no exemptions for smartphones and laptops. That's not the thing. So he constantly walks back even his walkbacks. It's pretty embarrassing. Here's another clip.
Right,
but it has been a disaster so far.
There are 90 days. Yeah, I mean, Josh, there are 90 days to negotiate with countries. According to people at the White House, they've already had a lot of countries get in touch to try and do new deals. Is it right to judge this now, or should we be a little bit more patient, notwithstanding the fairly reckless way that this has so far been rolled out?
Well, to be sure, Piers, there is a lot of truth to the fact that all of these countries are coming to make deals with the Trump administration. They were doing it before. They'll continue to do it. And I'm rooting for the United States, and I think most Americans are rooting for the Trump administration to succeed. But it's impossible to ignore the fact that trade deals take months, if not years, to negotiate, and negotiating 90 of them in 90 days is not only unprecedented, it's basically fantastical. And, you know, will they get 10? Will they get 20? Will they get 30? I hope they get as many as they can. But what is the cost of that turbulence? What is the benefit versus the price that we pay while we're subjecting our economy and all these other economies, by the way, all these economies around the world that are so dependent on us, to all of this suffering and pain while we, you know, change our policy this way and that way? It just has to be weighed against the perceived benefits. So it's complex, and, you know, I'm not saying that they won't succeed to some degree, but it's impossible to ignore the fact that the way that they're doing it is causing massive, massive damage, not just to our economy. And I agree with Gordon that, you know, it's time to confront Chinese predatory and unfair trade practices across the board. But we get one shot at this. And I think isolating China is going to be really difficult, especially when China is increasing its relationship with all the countries around the world that we're also alienating at the same time. So, yeah, it's not impossible that he could succeed, but it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good. It's time to confront Chinese predatory and unfair trade practice.
So Josh Rogan here, I think, makes a fairly nuanced point. He might even be overly generous to the Trump administration in this respect, which he's saying it is possible that Trump could defy the odds, I suppose, right? And again, a Hail Mary pass, right, to use a football analogy. It's possible, but it is unlikely, and it would contradict the body of history and the body of evidence and the body of expertise. And so far, there have been no meaningful benefits or beneficial impacts to the American people, which is another point that gets brought up, which is like, listen, if you want to say it's possible, that's fine. But we are now weeks and months into this, and it's been a disaster so far, and any honest person needs to acknowledge that. Here's another clip.
All right, Vinny, look, you're a massive Trumper. You were with him at the weekend at the UFC, and we'll come to that in Florida, where he got a roaring ovation. There's no doubt the country, as always with Trump, is split, where a lot of liberals are in complete, raging fury about him. And at the same time, in places like Florida, he can do no wrong. But I saw a poll on CNN this morning, which has actually been, the polling they've been doing on him has been quite positive until now. But the polling on do Americans trust Trump on the economy, and do they blame him or Biden for the state of the economy right now, they've never been worse for Trump. So now the American people have moved from blaming Biden to now blaming Trump, and his own approval rating on the economy is plummeting pretty rapidly. Now, I know Trump well, as you do, and he won't like that. He won't like the fact that his economic polling is plummeting. So this has to work quite quickly, doesn't it? Yeah,
Piers, I think, well, first of all, the just him walking into the UFC, like you said, we're going to get into, I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I saw Michael Jackson when I was a kid, and it was at that level, but we'll get into that. But Piers, here's my thing. Obviously, all we're going to hear is the fear-mongering from the other side. Everything from the past 8 years when he first came in, it was, we're going to go to war with Korea. He was a Russian asset. We're going to go to war. Everything is fear-mongering. Piers, the guy hasn't been in for 3 months. Everybody needs to just relax. Just like Gordon said, let it take time. And I have an analogy, Piers. Our country, like, you know what a heroin addict, when they finally stop doing the heroin and they put them in a room, they're detoxing, they're shaking, they're sweating, they're going through a bunch of, the bodies are convulsing. That's what America's going through, Piers. We've been hooked on this freaking government, everybody walking all over us, every country taking advantage of us. It's going to hurt for a little while, Piers, but guess what? The tariffs are going to work. Stock market jumped 400 points today. Everybody needs to chill. And then, Piers, by the way, how many factories are reopening? Steel jobs are coming back to America. Japan pledged $1 trillion to come here. The UAE committed $1.4 trillion in 10 years. Saudi Arabia just lined up $600 billion, possibly hitting $1 trillion. It's not small talk, it's respect. And Cheng said it's not the art of the deal. This is exactly exactly what it is. He knows how to play this freaking game. Now he doesn't have all the Russia and all the crazy shit happening around him. Just give him some time. Let him cook. Everything's going to be okay. You'll see. Trust me.
Yeah, so Vinny there getting worked up. A couple of things I would just say. So Trump reportedly got commitments during his first term in office. They never manifested themselves, number one. Number two, why should they when Donald Trump's tariff policy is so wildly inconsistent? Why would people actually follow through on their pledges if they think that the tariff policy will change from day to day or week to week or month to month, and presumably Trump won't be in power forever? And so number two. But number three, Donald Trump promised that he would bring immediate positive results for the American people on day one. That was the exact quote. Day one, he would change things for the better. He would curb inflation. He would cut cost of living down. He would just magically snap his fingers and solve all these issues. That was what he promised the American people. And now you're saying, okay, months of convulsion, withdrawal symptoms, effectively, which are torturous. That's what you're now selling the American people, because you tried to sell them something else when you were recording their votes. Now that you have their votes, now that you're secured, well, now you're doing a bait and switch. Well, actually, no, it's going to be hell for several months. But don't worry, we're getting promises from people, nebulous promises, to take it at the absolute face value. And in a few years, we might have more jobs here. We might have better trade deals, assuming the trade deficits again at face value, or America getting screwed over, which they're not. But this is the problem, right? Vinny doesn't want to confront the fact that Donald Trump's approval rating on the economy and overall are in the toilet. And as Piers Morgan says, we're at the point now where Trump is being rightly blamed for economic mismanagement instead of being able to point and deflect to President Biden, which is what he's been trying to do and his administration is desperate to do. Polling is pretty disastrous on this, and there's no evidence that the tariffs are working. There's no evidence that previous iterations of the tariffs under Trump were working at all. Again, it amounted to the biggest tax hike, or one of the biggest tax hikes in American history, and 92% of the revenue generated by Trump's tariffs in his first term from China had to basically be redirected towards subsidizing American farmers that he screwed over by starting a trade war with China in the first place. So not exactly sure where the evidence is of massive success here, but this is what happens when you're part of a cult, as Vinny is. So there we have it. I definitely recommend that you check out the full thing in its entirety. But in the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.